Ilara's days were painted in the soft hues of dawn and dusk, mirroring the gentle rhythm of village life. Her home, small but sturdy, held the scent of wood smoke and dried herbs, a comforting aroma that spoke of generations of love and labor. But the true heart of her dwelling, the object upon which her most tender affections rested, was her wedding gown. It wasn't merely a garment, it was a tapestry woven with dreams, hopes, and the promise of a future shared with Tomas. Each stitch was a testament to her own dedication, each carefully placed embellishment a whisper of her love. The gown itself was made of flax, grown in her own garden, spun into thread, and woven into a fabric that felt both strong and delicate. Run your fingers along the seams, and you would feel the unwavering precision of her hand. The lace trim, painstakingly crocheted by her grandmother, whispered stories of enduring love and family bonds. Look closer and you'd notice the tiny seed pearls, each one individually sewn onto the bodice, catching the light like captured starlight. But it was the pearl buttons that truly captivated. Each one, a perfect sphere of iridescent beauty, held the faint impression of Ilara's thumb from when she'd sewn it on. The strong, deliberate stitching around the waist and hem spoke of practicality as much as beauty. Ilara wasn't one for frivolous adornment. She believed in things that were both beautiful and useful. This gown would not only grace her wedding day but could be altered and repurposed in the years to come, perhaps even as a christening gown for her own children. It represented more than just a wedding. It was an investment in the future, a symbol of continuity, and a tangible representation of her commitment to Tomas and their shared life. The hours she poured into its creation were a meditation, a silent promise to cherish the life they would build together. It was a source of immense pride and quiet joy, a treasure beyond measure. To part with it would be to part with a piece of herself. The whispers started like a dry rustling in the fields, a prelude to the storm that was about to break. At first, it was just a poor harvest, a few families struggling more than usual. Then the rains stopped, the crops withered, and the whispers turned into cries. The famine descended upon the village like a suffocating blanket. Ilara first noticed it in the children. Their laughter, once a constant melody, faded into weak coughs. Their rosy cheeks paled, their bright eyes dimming with a hunger that gnawed not just at their bellies, but at their very spirits. She saw young Mara, barely old enough to walk, clinging to her mother's skirts, her tiny hands trembling. Mara's usual joyful babble was replaced by a plaintive whimper, a sound that pierced Ilara's heart like a shard of ice. The marketplace, once bustling with activity, became a desolate space. Stalls stood empty, the vibrant colors of fruits and vegetables replaced by the dull gray of dust. The air, once filled with the aroma of baking bread, now carried the faint, acrid smell of desperation. The parents, once strong and proud, were now shadows of their former selves. Their faces were etched with worry lines, their eyes hollow with the pain of watching their children suffer. Ilara saw fathers bartering away their tools, their livestock, anything they could spare for a handful of grain. She saw mothers weeping silently, their breasts dry, unable to provide nourishment for their infants. One day, Ilara visited old widow Agnes, whose grandson, little Leo, was particularly frail. Leo's ribs were visible beneath his thin skin, his eyes large and pleading. Agnes, her own body weakened by hunger, could only offer him a watery broth made from boiled weeds. Ilara watched as Leo struggled to swallow, his small body racked with coughs. That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. The image of Leo's gaunt face haunted her. The feel of the wedding gown hanging in her closet felt like a cruel taunt. How could she celebrate love and new beginnings when children were starving? The delicate lace seemed to mock her, the pearl buttons glinting like unshed tears. The gnawing hunger in the village mirrored a growing emptiness within her, a realization that her personal happiness paled in comparison to the suffering around her. The decision began to form, a seed of sacrifice planted in the fertile ground of her compassion. The dawn arrived cold and gray, mirroring the chill that had settled in Alara's heart. Sleep offered no escape, only a swirling vortex of skeletal faces and the ghostly image of her gown. She rose, her movements heavy, and walked to the closet. The gown hung there, pristine and expectant, a silent accusation in the dim light. She reached out, her fingers tracing the delicate lace, the smooth pearl buttons. Each touch was a farewell, a silent apology to the dreams woven into its fabric. This wasn't just about a dress. It was about tradition, about the hopes and expectations of her family, about the symbol of her love for Tomas. The tradition weighed heavily on her. Generations of brides had worn similar gowns, each one a link in a chain of love and commitment. To break that chain felt like a betrayal, a severing of ties to her past and her future. Yet the faces of the starving children were a more immediate, more compelling force. The immediate need to save lives warred with the weight of her personal desires. How could she justify wearing such a beautiful gown, indulging in a celebration of love, when others were struggling to survive? The image of Leo, his frail body consumed by hunger, flashed before her eyes, tipping the scales. The decision was agonizing, a tearing apart of her soul. She wrestled with the thought of Tomas, of disappointing him, of delaying their wedding. But she knew deep down that he would understand. He was a kind and compassionate man, and he wouldn't want her to stand by while others suffered. She took the gown from the closet, its weight surprisingly light in her hands. It felt almost ethereal, as if the dreams woven into its fabric were already beginning to dissipate. She folded it carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles, trying to preserve its beauty for as long as possible. As she carried the gown towards the door, she paused, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't just the loss of the gown she mourned, but the loss of innocence, the realization that life wasn't always fair, that sometimes difficult choices had to be made. But beneath the sadness, a sense of purpose began to bloom. She may be sacrificing her dreams, but she was also embracing a greater responsibility, a commitment to her community, a willingness to put the needs of others before her own. The pearl buttons seemed to gleam, reflecting not just the light, but a newfound strength within her. Silas was a man etched with the harsh lines of a life spent navigating the precarious currents of trade. His face, weathered and tanned, held a perpetual squint, as if constantly assessing the value of everything he saw. He dealt in essential goods, grain, tools, salt, the lifeblood of the region, and he knew their worth intimately. Ilara found him in the dusty corner of the marketplace that still hosted a semblance of commerce. His stall, usually overflowing, was sparsely stocked, reflecting the scarcity that gripped the village. He sat behind it, a hawk-like figure, his eyes sharp and calculating. Approaching him was like entering a lion's den. Ilara clutched the carefully wrapped gown, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Silas," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to trade." Silas raised a skeptical eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over her. He knew she was betrothed, he knew the value of a wedding gown, and he suspected what she was about to offer. "What have you got, girl? I'm not buying trinkets." Ilara placed the bundle on the rough wooden counter. "This." Silas frowned as she unwrapped the gown, revealing its delicate beauty. He let out a dry chuckle. "A dress." "What am I supposed to do with a dress? Eat it." "It's not just a dress," Ilara insisted, her voice gaining strength. "It's a wedding gown, hand-sewn, the finest material." "Oh, that..." Silas ran a calloused hand over the fabric, his expression unchanged. "Fine, maybe, but useless to me. I need grain, tools, things people can use to survive." "I need salt," Ilara countered, her eyes pleading. "A barrel of salt." "For the children." Silas remained unmoved. Salt is precious. It's worth more than any dress, especially in times like these. He named a price far lower than what the gown was worth, an insult even in these desperate times. The bartering began, a tense dance between need and greed. Alara argued, her voice rising with desperation, pointing out the quality of the fabric, the intricate stitching, the value of the pearl buttons. Silas remained stubborn, his eyes fixed on profit. But as he looked into Alara's eyes, he saw something that started to chip away at his resolve. He saw the raw, unyielding desperation of a woman willing to sacrifice everything for her community. He saw the reflection of the suffering that gripped the village, a suffering he couldn't ignore, not completely. The metallic taste of fear mixed with a glimmer of hope. Silas, still hesitant, picked up the gown, his rough fingers a stark contrast to the delicate fabric. He held it up to the weak sunlight filtering through the marketplace awning, his squint deepening as he scrutinized every detail. It was as if he were trying to unravel the very essence of the garment, searching for flaws, for reasons to justify his low offer. He ran his calloused thumb along the lace trim, his expression unreadable. The lace, crocheted with such care by Alara's grandmother, felt fragile beneath his touch. He examined the stitching, his eyes narrowing as he searched for imperfections. He pulled gently at the seams, testing their strength, his silence amplifying the tension in the air. He turned the gown inside out, his gaze sweeping over the lining, searching for signs of wear or damage. He noticed the small, almost invisible stitches that held the lining in place, the careful attention to detail that spoke of Alara's dedication. His fingers lingered on the pearl buttons, tracing their smooth surfaces. He noticed the faint impressions of Alara's thumb, a testament to the hours she had spent sewing them on. He held one up to the light, admiring its iridescent sheen. He then moved on to the embroidery, his eyes scanning the intricate patterns of flowers and vines. He recognized the skill and artistry that went into creating such a delicate design. He knew that the gown was valuable, not just for its materials, but for the time and effort that had been invested in its creation. The silence stretched on, each moment amplifying Alara's anxiety. She watched him, her breath held captive in her chest, the metallic taste of fear coating her tongue. Would he accept the trade? Would he see the true value of the gown, not just in its monetary worth, but in its potential to save lives? Silas remained silent, his face a mask of calculation. He seemed to be weighing the value of the gown against the value of his own conscience, the profit he could make against the suffering of the village. The fate of the children, the future of the village, seemed to hang in the balance, dependent on the decision of this one man. Alara could only wait, her heart pounding, her hope flickering like a fragile flame in the wind. Every stitch, every pearl, every thread of the gown seemed to whisper a silent plea. Finally, Silas sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "All right," he said, his voice gruff. "A barrel of salt, but that's my final offer, not a grain more." Relief washed over Alara, so potent it almost buckled her knees. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, thank you." Silas gestured to a large wooden barrel tucked away in the back of his stall. It was filled to the brim with coarse, gray salt, a stark contrast to the delicate beauty of the gown. He watched as Alara struggled to lift it, the weight almost too much for her. As she strained to maneuver the barrel, she caught one last glimpse of her wedding gown. It lay on the counter, bathed in the pale sunlight, its pearl buttons gleaming like distant stars. A pang of loss pierced her heart, sharp and sudden. It was more than just a dress. It was a symbol of her dreams, her hopes, her future. But the pang was quickly overshadowed by a surge of purpose. The image of Leo, his gaunt face and pleading eyes, flashed before her. She straightened her back, her grip tightening on the barrel. This salt wasn't just a commodity, it was a lifeline, a chance to save lives, to alleviate suffering. Silas watched her, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. He saw the determination in her stance, the unwavering resolve in her gaze. He knew that she wasn't just a naive bride-to-be. She was a woman of strength and courage, willing to sacrifice everything for her community. He helped her load the barrel onto a makeshift cart, his movements surprisingly gentle. "Be careful," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Salt is precious, don't waste it. Alara nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She knew that she had a responsibility to distribute the salt wisely, to ensure that it reached those who needed it most. As she pulled the cart away from the marketplace, leaving her wedding gown behind, she felt a sense of both loss and liberation. She had sacrificed her dreams, but she had also discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. The metallic taste of fear was still present, but it was now tempered by a sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of times, one person could make a difference. The stitches of her sacrifice were now interwoven with the hope of a brighter future for her village. The barrel of salt felt heavier with each step, not in physical weight, but in the responsibility it carried. Alara knew that every grain was precious, every pinch could mean the difference between survival and starvation. She walked from house to house, her face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She started with widow Agnes and little Leo. The relief that flooded Agnes's face when Alara presented her with a small pouch of salt was enough to bring tears to her eyes. She clutched Alara's hand, her voice trembling with gratitude. "God bless you, child," she whispered. "God bless you." Leo, his eyes still too large for his face, managed a weak smile. Alara showed Agnes how to use the salt sparingly to preserve the meager broth she was preparing. A tiny pinch, she explained, could make it last longer, provide vital nutrients to strengthen Leo's frail body. Next, she visited Mara's family. Mara, the little girl who had haunted Alara's thoughts, was lying listlessly in her mother's arms. Her mother's face was drawn with worry, her eyes hollow with despair. When Alara offered her salt, the woman wept openly, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't speak, but her gratitude was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of Alara's sacrifice. Alara carefully measured out a portion of salt, explaining how to use it to preserve the few vegetables they had managed to salvage from their garden. A small amount, she emphasized, could prevent spoilage, extend their meager supplies. As she continued her rounds, distributing the salt to each family in need, she witnessed countless acts of kindness and resilience. People sharing their meager portions, offering comfort to their neighbors, finding strength in their shared suffering. A young boy, seeing Alara struggling with the heavy cart, offered to help her pull it. An elderly woman, despite her own hunger, insisted on giving Alara a piece of dried fruit. These small gestures, born out of compassion and generosity, warmed Alara's heart and renewed her spirit. The children, their eyes regaining a flicker of their former brightness, followed her through the village, their tiny voices filled with hope. "Salt," they chanted, "Alara brought us salt." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, Alara felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a deep sense of peace. She had lost her wedding gown, but she had gained something far more valuable. The gratitude of her community, the knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had helped to alleviate their suffering. The stitches of kindness she helped sew began to push back the metallic taste of fear. The smiles on the faces of the children, the tears of gratitude from the mothers, were her reward, her solace, her wedding gift. The fragile peace that Alara had helped to create was shattered as quickly as it had formed. The sound of approaching horses, the clatter of armor, the ominous beat of a war drum, these were the harbingers of a new terror, a threat far greater than hunger. Commander Vorin and his militia arrived like a swarm of locusts, their presence casting a long, dark shadow over the already weakened village. They were hardened soldiers, their faces grim, their eyes cold and calculating. They moved with a ruthless efficiency, their purpose clear, to seize whatever resources the village had left. The metallic taste of fear returned, stronger than ever, coating every tongue, constricting every breath. The whispers started again, but this time they were filled with terror, with tales of Vorin's cruelty, his ruthlessness, his insatiable greed. People scrambled to hide, seeking refuge in their homes, in the surrounding woods, anywhere they could escape the militia's grasp. Doors were bolted, windows were shuttered, the village transforming into a ghost town, silent and still, holding its breath in anticipation of the storm. Alara watched from her window, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw the soldiers marching through the streets, their weapons glinting in the sunlight, their faces impassive. She saw them kicking down doors, ransacking homes, terrorizing the villagers. The whispers of Voron's cruelty spread like wildfire. He was said to be a man without mercy, a tyrant who delighted in inflicting pain and suffering. He was rumored to have burned entire villages to the ground, to have enslaved countless people, to have amassed a fortune through theft and violence. The stitches of hope that Alara had so carefully sewn began to unravel, replaced by the chilling threads of despair. The salt, the symbol of her sacrifice, now seemed inadequate, a mere drop in the face of this overwhelming threat. She thought of Tomas, who was away tending to his family's farm, miles from the village. She wondered if he was safe, if he would ever return. The fear for his safety, combined with the terror that gripped her village, was almost unbearable. As the militia tightened its grip on the village, Alara knew that she couldn't stand by and do nothing. She had to find a way to protect her community, to save them from Voron's cruelty. The metallic taste of fear fueled a desperate resolve, a determination to fight back, to find a way to outwit the ruthless commander and his men. The gown was gone, but the strength it took to sacrifice it remained. Amidst the chaos and terror, a sliver of hope flickered in Alara's mind. She remembered her interaction with Silas, the salt trader. During their tense bartering session, he had mentioned, almost casually, that he also supplied Commander Voron's militia. The memory struck her like a bolt of lightning. Silas, he was the key, the link between her desperate village and the ruthless commander. A dangerous idea began to form in her mind, a risky plan that could potentially save her community from Voron's clutches. She could use the salt connection to bribe Voron, offer him a continuous supply of salt in exchange for abandoning his plan to seize the village's remaining resources. It was a long shot, a gamble with incredibly high stakes, but it was the only option she could see. The plan was fraught with peril. Voron was known for his greed and his cruelty. He might see through her ruse, recognize her desperation, and exploit her vulnerability. He might even punish her and her village for daring to defy him, but Alara was determined. She had faced hunger, she had sacrificed her dreams, she had witnessed the suffering of her people. She wouldn't back down now, not when there was even a sliver of hope for survival. She carefully considered the details of her plan. She needed to approach Silas again, convince him to arrange a meeting with Voron. She needed to offer Voron something he couldn't refuse, something that would outweigh the immediate gains of plundering her village. The metallic taste of fear was still present, but it was now mixed with a steely resolve. She knew that she was walking into a lion's den, but she was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She would use her wits, her courage, and her connection to Silas to protect her community. The gown was gone, but the spirit that had inspired its creation remained. The strong, deliberate stitches that had held the fabric together were now mirrored in the strength of her resolve. She would weave a new tapestry of hope, using the threads of her connection to Silas and the precious commodity of salt to outwit Voron and save her village. The plan was risky, audacious, and potentially deadly, but Alara was ready to take the chance. Finding Silas was no easy task. The marketplace, once a hub of activity, was now deserted, patrolled by Voron's soldiers. Alara had to slip through the shadows, avoiding their watchful eyes, the metallic taste of fear a constant companion. She finally found him holed up in a back room of the ruined tavern, surrounded by crates of supplies. He looked haggard, his face pale, his usual confidence replaced by a wary apprehension. "Silas," Alara said, her voice low and urgent. Silas jumped, startled by her sudden appearance. He recognized her immediately, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What are you doing here? It's not safe." "I need your help," Alara said, her gaze unwavering. "I need to speak to Voron." Silas scoffed, shaking his head. Are you mad? You want to talk to Vorin? He'll have you thrown in a cell or worse. I know it's dangerous, Alara conceded, but I have a proposition for him, something that will benefit him more than plundering this village. Silas studied her intently, his eyes searching for any sign of deception. He saw the determination in her eyes, the unwavering resolve that had impressed him before. He also saw the fear, but it was tempered by a fierce courage that he couldn't ignore. What kind of proposition? He asked, his voice cautious. I know you supply him with salt, Alara said, her voice low. I can guarantee him a continuous supply, a steady stream of salt, if he agrees to leave our village in peace. Silas's eyes widened, his expression shifting from wariness to intrigue. He knew the value of salt, especially to an army. A steady supply could save him a lot of trouble and potentially increase his own profits. Vorin is a greedy man, Silas said, his mind already calculating the possibilities. He won't be easily swayed. I know, Alara said, but I believe I can convince him. I just need you to arrange a meeting. Silas hesitated, weighing the risks and the rewards. Helping Alara could be dangerous, but it could also be profitable. If he could secure a long-term salt contract with Vorin, he would be set for life. He looked at Alara, her face pale but resolute. He saw the fate of the village reflected in her eyes, the desperate need for a miracle. He knew that he was taking a gamble, but something about her courage, her unwavering commitment to her community, swayed him. The stitching of her desperate plea was hard to ignore. All right, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. I'll arrange a meeting, but I'm not promising anything. Vorin is a dangerous man. Be careful what you say, what you do. The metallic taste of fear made the decision difficult, but the potential for profit and a grudging respect for Alara sealed the deal. The meeting took place in the village square, the very heart of the community now under Vorin's control. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the shuffling of the soldiers' feet. The villagers watched from behind closed shutters, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Vorin sat on a makeshift throne, a commandeered wooden chair, his eyes like chips of ice, his face a mask of cold indifference. He was a large man, his body hardened by years of battle, his presence exuding power and menace. Alara stood before him, her head held high, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. Silas stood beside her, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously between Alara and Vorin. The metallic taste of fear was almost overwhelming. So, Vorin said, his voice a low growl. Silas tells me you have a proposition for me, something that will save me the trouble of taking what I want. That is correct, Commander, Alara said, her gaze unwavering. I can guarantee you a continuous supply of salt, enough for you and your men, in exchange for your promise to leave our village in peace. Vorin raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a sardonic smile. Salt? You think I can be bought with salt? I could take everything you have and more. You could, Alara conceded, but that would be a short-term gain. Plundering our village will only yield a limited amount of resources. We are already weakened by famine. A continuous supply of salt, on the other hand, is a long-term investment. It will provide you with a steady stream of value, without the risk and effort of constant raiding. She emphasized the practicality of her offer, appealing to his greed, his desire for wealth and power. Salt was essential for preserving food, for maintaining health, for controlling populations. A steady supply would give Vorin a significant advantage, a valuable commodity that he could trade or sell for profit. Vorin leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What makes you think you can guarantee me this supply? Your village is already struggling. How can you promise me something you may not be able to deliver? Silas is our trader, Alara said, gesturing towards the nervous merchant. He can vouch for our capabilities. We will ensure that you receive the salt you need, regularly and reliably. She held her breath, waiting for Voron's response. The fate of her village hung in the balance, dependent on his decision. The silence stretched on, the tension building to an almost unbearable level. Every stitch of her plan was being tested. Voron's eyes seemed to pierce through her, searching for any sign of weakness, any hint of deception. Voron's silence was more terrifying than any threat. He circled Alara slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. His eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to penetrate her very soul, searching for any weakness, any hint of deception. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice a low rumble. "Why are you doing this? What's in it for you?" Alara met his gaze unflinchingly. "I am doing this for my village," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am doing this to protect my people from suffering." Voron chuckled, a harsh, humorless sound. "Such noble sentiments, but I don't believe in altruism. Everyone has an angle, a hidden motive." "What's yours?" He was testing her, probing her resolve, savoring the power he held over her and her village. He enjoyed the game, the feeling of control, the knowledge that he could crush her and her community with a single word. The metallic taste of fear intensified, almost suffocating Alara. "I have nothing to gain personally," Alara insisted. "My only motive is to ensure the survival of my village." Voron stopped circling and stood directly in front of her, his face inches from hers. "You're a brave woman," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But bravery can be foolish. Don't mistake my interest for weakness. I could still take everything you have, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." He was reminding her of his power, of the precariousness of her position. He wanted to see her break, to witness her fear, to revel in his dominance. Alara refused to flinch. She held his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I know you could," she said, her voice steady. "But I believe you are a pragmatic man, Commander. You understand the value of a long-term investment. A continuous supply of salt is worth more than a single act of plunder." She was appealing to his greed again, reminding him of the benefits of her offer. She was also subtly challenging him, suggesting that he was intelligent enough to see the value in her proposition. Voron smiled, a slow, predatory grin. "You're clever, I'll give you that, but cleverness can be a dangerous thing. It can lead to arrogance, to overconfidence. Don't underestimate me, girl, I am not a fool." He was enjoying the game, the power dynamic, the sense of control. He was toying with her, dragging out the suspense, savoring the moment before he made his decision. Every stitch of Alara's resolve was being tested. The future of her village hung in the balance, dependent on her ability to outwit this ruthless commander. "It is not just about the salt, Commander," Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. "It is about the reliability, the consistency of the supply. You will not have to waste your time and resources raiding other villages, risking the lives of your men for uncertain gains. You will not have to worry about shortages, about the quality of the salt, about the dangers of transporting it through hostile territory." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "We will deliver the salt directly to you, regularly and reliably, without fail. You will have a steady stream of valuable goods without any risk, without any effort. Think of the benefits, Commander. No more raiding, no more bloodshed, just a constant flow of wealth and power." She painted a vivid picture of a life of ease and security, a future free from the constant threat of violence and scarcity. She knew that Voron was a man of ambition, a man who craved power and control. She believed that the promise of a guaranteed supply of salt, without any effort or risk, would be too tempting to resist. The metallic taste of fear began to recede, replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Your men will be healthier, stronger, more effective," Alara continued, emphasizing the benefits for his soldiers. "They will have the salt they need to preserve their food, to maintain their strength, to fight for you with unwavering loyalty. A well-supplied army is a powerful army, Commander." Silas, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, nodded nervously in agreement. He knew the value of a well-supplied army, and he knew that Vorin would appreciate the benefits of a consistent salt supply. "Think of the time you will save," Alara said, driving home her point. "No more wasting days searching for salt, no more diverting your troops from more important tasks. You can focus your energy on expanding your territory, on consolidating your power, on achieving your ambitions." She was appealing to his ambition, his desire for power, his need for control. She was offering him a way to achieve his goals more efficiently, more effectively, more safely. Vorin remained silent, his expression unreadable. He was weighing his options, calculating the risks and rewards. The decision was agonizingly slow, each moment stretching into an eternity. The stitches of Alara's carefully crafted plan were being tested, one by one. The fate of her village hung in the balance, dependent on Vorin's final verdict. The hall filled with the whispers of anticipation. Would her plan succeed? Would her village be spared? The air crackled with anticipation. The silence was deafening. Vorin finally broke the silence, a slow smile spreading across his face. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was a smile of agreement. "All right," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "You've convinced me. I accept your offer." Relief washed over Alara, so intense it almost brought her to her knees. The metallic taste of fear finally began to dissipate, replaced by a surge of hope and gratitude. Vorin stood up, his towering figure casting a long shadow over Alara. "I am impressed by your courage, girl," he said, his eyes glinting with a strange mixture of respect and amusement. "And I am a practical man. I see the value in your proposition." He turned to his men, issuing a series of sharp commands. The soldiers, who had been standing at attention, began to pack up their gear, their movements efficient and disciplined. Within minutes, the militia began to withdraw from the village, their horses kicking up dust as they rode away. The villagers, who had been watching from behind closed shutters, slowly emerged from their homes, their faces etched with disbelief and joy. The air was filled with cheers and shouts of celebration. The nightmare was over, at least for now. The village was safe, thanks to Alara's courage and her willingness to sacrifice everything for her community. Silas, his face pale but relieved, approached Alara. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You actually convinced him." "We did it," Alara corrected, her voice filled with gratitude. "You helped me, thank you." As the last of the soldiers disappeared over the horizon, Alara looked around at her village, at the faces of her people, their eyes shining with hope. The stitches of her plan had held, weaving a tapestry of resilience and determination. The village was still scarred by the famine, still weakened by the militia's presence, but it was alive. It was safe, and it was filled with a newfound sense of unity and purpose. Alara knew that the peace was fragile, that Vorin could return at any time. But for now, they were safe. For now, they could rebuild their lives, restore their community, and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. The gown was gone, but the strength it took to sacrifice it remained. The pearl buttons, the lace trim, the delicate stitching, these were all symbols of her courage, her compassion, her unwavering commitment to her people. And they were a reminder that even in the darkest of times, one person could make a difference. The metallic taste of fear was replaced by the sweet taste of victory. The village was safe for now. Alara returned to her village not as a bride-to-be, but as a hero. The villagers lined the streets, their faces filled with gratitude and admiration. They cheered her name, they showered her with flowers, they hailed her as their savior. She had lost her wedding gown, a symbol of her personal dreams, but she had gained something far more valuable, the respect and love of her people. She was no longer just Alara, the bride-to-be. She was Alara, the protector of her village, the embodiment of their resilience and their hope. The famine had scarred them, the militia had terrorized them, but they were still standing. They were still united. And they were forever bound together by the threads of sacrifice and courage that Alara had woven. As the celebrations died down, Alara found herself drawn to her small cottage, the place where she had spent so many hours crafting her wedding gown. The closet was empty, the space where the gown had hung now a void. But the memories remained, the feel of the fabric, the smoothness of the pearl buttons, the intricate details of the lace trim. She knew that she would never forget the gown, never forget the sacrifice she had made, but she also knew that she had made the right choice. She had saved her village, and that was worth more than any dress. She sat down at her sewing table, her fingers tracing the familiar patterns on the worn wooden surface. She picked up a needle and thread, her skilled hands moving instinctively, but she wasn't sewing a wedding gown. She was mending clothes for the villagers. She mended torn shirts, patched ragged trousers, stitched up ripped blankets. Her skilled stitching, once a symbol of hope for a future marriage, was now a symbol of hope for a brighter future for her community. Each stitch was a testament to her resilience, her determination, her unwavering commitment to her people. She was weaving a new tapestry of hope, using the threads of her skill and her compassion. As she sewed, she thought of Tomas, her beloved Tomas. She wondered when he would return, what he would think of everything that had happened. She knew that he would be proud of her, that he would understand her sacrifice. The gown was gone, but their love remained. Their future was uncertain, but their bond was strong. And together they would rebuild their lives, restore their community, and face whatever challenges lay ahead. The metallic taste of fear was gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done everything she could. The stitches of her sacrifice became the foundation for a future built on hope and resilience, a future where the love for her community was her greatest treasure.